Everyone's talking about the great job Brian De Palma did directing The Untouchables this year. I like just as much a little thriller he made 14 years ago called Sisters, which was about a couple of sisters. Margot Kidder plays one, and Jennifer Salt plays the reporter who in this split-screen scene sees one of the sisters commit a murder.
Hello? I want to report an emergency, a murder.
That's a beautiful camera shot. As frightening as anything in the picture is when Jennifer Salt tracks the sister to a mental hospital where a crazed doctor drugs her. Then he shows her the truth about Margot Kidder.
You want to know all our secrets? Fine. We will share them with you. Watch.
Plenty of surprises in this film. A touch of Hitchcock, certainly. The voyeurism of Rear Window is all through this picture, with lots of scenes of us looking at characters through window. And the whole bit about the innocent person wrongly accused, which was a major theme in Hitchcock's films. The tension in this film is constant. The gory scenes, and they do get a little gory, are not repellent at all because they are so well made and not heavy-handed. In many ways, Sisters is my favorite Brian De Palma film, because it was on a smaller budget than The Untouchables. It's pure movie making. I loved it a lot.
That it is, and you could actually go into a video store and pick almost anything by Brian De Palma and have a good time because he is theatrical and because he is out in front with wanting to touch you and wanting to involve you and wanting to shock you and surprise you. He's criticized sometimes for ripping off Hitchcock. He doesn't really rip him off. He doesn't steal anything that Hitchcock. What he does is he takes a starting off point of some of the observations Hitchcock made about elementary things like our fear of being accused of a crime that we didn't commit, and then he goes from there. This is a good movie.
Oh, and I love there's a whole thing involving a birthday cake in this movie. It's very bloody. It's a new level of frosting on the cake. Let's put it that way.
I think you've really painted an attractive picture for it.
Okay, our next film is one of my favorites, directed by Brian De Palma. He had a big hit recently with The Untouchables, but his roots are in low-budget thrillers, and I don't think he's ever made anyone better than Sisters from 1973. It's the shockingly good story of Siamese twin sisters who were surgically separated, leaving one a nice young woman and the other a killer. Margot Kidder plays the sisters, and here her boyfriend finds out, fatally, about the bad sister as he delivers a birthday cake to the good sister.
Surprise. Hey, now you know you're not supposed to cut the cake until you make a wish and blow out the candles.
This whole situation may be preposterous, but the level of filmmaking is so strong that we are swept away in the drama's own compelling visual logic. Sisters has a wonderfully bizarre supporting cast, including Jennifer Salt as a reporter trying to solve the mystery, as well as William Finlay as a very creepy mastermind doctor who wants to keep both sisters alive. And above all, it's a truly scary picture, the kind that does have you looking over your shoulder during the movie. I was actually scared by this picture.
Did you actually look over your shoulder?
Yes, I did. This shoulder right here.
The right shoulder.
Yeah.
Okay, it's nice to know that. You know, at this time in his career, De Palma was making a lot of good thrillers, and another one was Obsession. Remember, with Cliff Robertson as the man is trying to find the woman that he used to look. Romantic, but with an enormously frightening ending, if you remember.
The last sequence is frightening. This is frightening throughout. The opening sequence here is terrifying, and he uses split screen very well. It's a well-made motion picture.
It is a good film.
There's one thing that I want to say about the whole group. When they break out and are good enough to recommend, horror films, I think, have a contemporary quality about them, a brightness in the writing, and a brightness in the characters. If the characters are made more challenging, then the horror that they're facing can be more frightening to us.
And do you know why that is? I think it goes all the way back to some of the great Universal horror films of the 1930s. One thing that directors have always known is that if you have either horror or sex in a movie, you can get away with not having stars and not having a big budget. Those are two subjects that do sell on their own. And so frequently, new directors starting out, directors like De Palma, for example, or some of these others, have gone to the horror genre because that allows them the freedom to make a potentially successful commercial movie without having to have a lot of millions of dollars in order to do it.
Phantom of the Paradise. Here's yet another dependable movie cliche, which we could call the Carrie syndrome, after the movie Carrie, in which, as you will recall, a character was dead and buried and still wasn't dead. In fact, in horror movies, thrillers, and mysteries, you can almost always count on one thing. When the bad guy is killed and is dead and is out of the picture and is kaput, there will inevitably be a scene where he turns out to still be alive. In a way, I kind of enjoy the scenes where the dead monster attacks again. I absolutely know what's on the way. I know all the advanced signs. The hero sighs with relief. Everything is quiet. And then suddenly, in the ground, the monster jumps up again, or the killer, whoever it is. And I'm waiting for it, and so when I'm surprised anyway, I give the director points.
It's been 15 years since Carrie. The cliche could be safely retired now. I think everyone in the audience knows when that's happening. And
wouldn't you be kind of disappointed if somebody was killed and they were just plain dead? And
well, maybe you could just get a twitch.
They're going to make Alien 3. Do you think it's going to happen in Alien 3?
You may be right.
A few years later, in 1976, she gave another one of my favorite Bujold performances in Brian De Palma's Obsession. And here she is playing an art restorer who is the exact double of Cliff Robertson's dead wife.
I wondered if I might repay you for your lecture and ask you to dinner somewhere.
You don't understand. Dinner can be a pretty serious affair here.
Lunch. I know a place nearby.
Signore, I thought it was the Italian man who picked up the American women. All right. Lunch. But I have to work another hour and a half before I go.
I'll wait.
In the other scene, you saw the tough side of Bujold. Here you see the tender side. What you see both times is something that has always fascinated me in her relationships with men in the movies, and that is her character is never the kind of woman that you think you can sweep off her feet with any kind of romantic malarkey. This is a woman who has a mind and who responds to appeals, I think, to her intellect. That's why her characters are always interesting.
Gene, I'm glad you said that just as we go into my first guilty pleasure, which is a 1978 thriller that's a totally off-the-wall combination of extrasensory perception, science fiction, international espionage, and teenage romance. It was called The Fury, and it's about two kids who have mysterious paranormal powers that enable them to move objects simply by thinking about them. Now, Andrew Stevens is one of the kids with this power of telekinesis, and he's in an amusement park when the sight of a group of Arabs causes him to totally lose control. Now, some Arabs were responsible for the death of his father, and now, almost against his will, with his veins throbbing in his forehead, he uses his paranormal powers to gain revenge. There's no Arab energy crisis there. The energy in that scene is typical of the whole movie. Now, some people said The Fury was silly. I agree, it was silly. Some said it was preposterous. I agree, it was preposterous. But moment for moment and scene for scene, The Fury was terrific, silly, preposterous fun. It was good entertainment. And that's why I really don't feel guilty about liking it, as we go to the movies for all kinds of reasons, and the chance to enjoy a cheerfully outrageous adventure like this, film with great craftsmanship and style, is one of the reasons that we go.
Well, I'm already on record when the film came out 2 years ago as not being a big fan of it. As I look at that sequence, I can't deny at least that that sequence is extremely well crafted. It builds up to a pitch, and then I love how he reduces it to that one bolt. All the energy is down to the one bolt.
I think
Very
we're
well
talking
done.
about a movie that's a very good example of its type. Now, if you
Yes.
remember, and I'm sure that you haven't been able to block this from your memory, our choice last year on this show as the worst movie of the year was something called The Medusa Touch.
Richard Burton.
Richard Burton, and the veins in his forehead were throbbing, and the plane went down, and so forth.
Terrible.
And it was stupefyingly stupid. It was just incredibly bad. Now, here is a movie that has a lot of grace and style. It's the same kind of film, and I liked it.
Dressed to Kill. Michael Caine, Angie Dickinson, Nancy Allen. Dressed to Kill. Murder made to order.
Our next picture is a real step up in class. It's Blowout, an exciting, thoughtful new thriller by director Brian De Palma, who has made such interesting thrillers as Sisters, Carrie, and Dressed to Kill. Blowout has a little more content to it than those films. It's an unnerving blend of a series of national tragedies: President Kennedy's assassination, Senator Kennedy's accident in Chappaquiddick, and the Watergate cover-up, all rolled into a story about a movie sound effects technician on the trail of a political murder. John Travolta stars as the sound expert. One night he's out in the country recording the sounds of nature for a movie he's working on when a car carrying a state governor and a young woman comes rushing by him.
Jesus Christ.
Travolta ends up saving the woman, but the governor dies. It turns out that the governor was the object of a political dirty trick that got wildly out of control. And Travolta and the young woman end up being the only ones who try to get to the truth of his death. In the process, both of their lives are threatened. In this scene, Travolta wires the young woman for sound with a hidden microphone. They're both a little paranoid as she goes off to meet a television reporter to give him the story of what really happened.
Okay, give me a sound level. Count to 10. Slow.
1, 2, 3, 4.
No, just normal.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right.
Come on, we gotta get going here.
Okay, now look, don't forget you got this on, okay?
Okay.
If you need me, just talk to me. You got that right there.
Okay, affirmative.
Sally, come here.
What?
Thank you.
Over and out.
She doesn't realize a killer is masquerading as the reporter and that her life is in danger. Travolta does, and he chases after her.
I guess we lost him, huh?
Well, we can't be too careful. I tell you what, why don't you just walk slowly down to the end of the platform, right in front of me, okay?
You know, I don't know why you think anyone would want to follow us anyway.
You'd be amazed what some people would do for a story like this.
Yeah, I guess so.
Now, don't turn around. We don't want to give ourselves away, huh?
Yeah, right.
Just pretend like nothing's happened.
Just look at the place. This is disgusting, you know?
It's a real shame.
It's not even safe anymore, you know? It reminds me of that story about that guy in New York. You remember that one?
Yeah, I think we did a piece on it.
Yeah, he's the guy who'd ride the subways at rush hour, and he'd stand in the corner real quiet so as nobody'd notice him, you know? And then they'd pull into a station, and he'd open up his coat, and he'd pull out this big old meat car. Wham! He'd whack him right over the head with it.
Let's go, Sally.
Yeah, and then they had this transit strike, and he just disappeared. It was like he went on strike, too, you know?
That was John Lithgow, just terrific as the bad guy in this film. This is a different kind of role for John Travolta, too. He's not playing a teenager here, as he did in Grease or Saturday Night Fever. He does a believable job of unraveling the mystery and involving us along with him. Blowout is a good, tense thriller, and also a fairly serious consideration, I think, of the political dirty tricks game and of our national nightmares of political assassination. That's why I really like Blowout. It's much more than a thriller.
Total agreement. I think this is Brian De Palma's best picture. I think it's one of the best pictures of the year. I liked it for 3 reasons. I think you probably share them. It works as a thriller. It works as a consideration of political conspiracy. It really does give us a feeling behind the Watergate mentality. Gee, we've committed a little crime. We have to commit much bigger crimes to cover that up. The third thing that I really like, this is something De Palma doesn't always do, he made the characters in this movie very believable as human beings. Even though they're involved in this really labyrinthine conspiracy, most of their actions are things that I think most people would do if they were in the same situation. I never felt the characters were doing things only because the plot required them to.
You're saying that De Palma's film has a lot more humanity than some of his others, which have been a lot of shock shows. I think that there's a final scene, I won't say what it is, there's a final shot in this movie that I think is one of the saddest scenes that I really can ever see, done by Travolta. I think the film does step up in its class from just a mere thriller, and I think that there's a real return to the movies of the early 70s, American films thinking about what's going on in the country, and I like that about this picture. I cared about these characters and the job of telling the truth that they were trying to do in this film. It got to me.
I think that last shot with Travolta, the reason it strikes us so deeply and really affects us is that it's a tribute to Travolta's performance throughout the whole film. We really care about this guy. He's not simply a pawn in a thriller. My next choice for an overlooked video is Blowout, a 1981 movie by Brian De Palma, who specializes in crime and suspense in the bizarre and has never filmed a more intricate plot than this one. The movie stars John Travolta as a motion picture sound man who is recording some sounds and taking some photos late one night when he accidentally records what looks like a road mishap. A young woman is involved and a powerful official is killed, and as Travolta plays his tapes again and again, a tantalizing mystery seems to be hiding there just beyond the range of his eyes and ears. In this scene, he tries to convince a skeptical cop.
A bang?
Yeah, some sort of a bang.
Where?
I'm not sure where.
You were facing the car?
Yes.
Well, you heard the blowout.
Yes, I heard the blowout, but the first sound I heard was a bang.
This is kind of an echo.
No. Look, I know what an echo sounds like. I'm a sound man. And the bang was before the blowout.
What were you doing up there?
I was recording sounds for a movie I'm working on.
You recorded the accident?
Yes.
Well, what happened after that?
Well, then the car went off the road into the creek, and I ran
What did you do then?
I'm trying to tell you what I did. I ran down, jumped in the creek, and pulled out the girl.
There was a girl?
Yes, there was a girl.
What girl?
The girl that I brought here, the girl in the room.
Obviously, there are some parallels there with the Chappaquiddick incident. When Blowout was first released, it didn't get very good reviews, and one of the complaints was that De Palma was ripping off Blow Up, that classic 1966 film by Michelangelo Antonioni. I don't think so. Blowout is more of a traditional thriller. The mystery does have a solution. All the clues are right there in front of us.
I liked it too, Roger. And looking at that scene of an early Travolta, if you will, and the early scene of Stallone, I think, again, here is a street guy who has gotten into become a superstar, and he's lost that street life that we find so entertaining. I felt that this guy was actually in danger, and that's critical for a thriller. And lately he's been in very safe PG and PG-13 rated films. Here's in a tough picture. It was a good little thriller. Not as great as The Conversation, also involving tapes and a sound man, but a good one nonetheless.
A good film. You know, when people rent videotapes, sometimes they program a double feature. I would program Blowout with FX, which was the thriller about a special effects man. So you got the sound guy, the special effects guy, both trying to use their trades in order to solve a crime.
And if you want to see a better one, see The Conversation.
Gee, well, I hope you are going to select that for later on the show, right?
I'm not, but maybe I will in another show that we do.
Okay, well, I'm always happy to help out with these late thoughts that you have occurring to you after you're already in midstream.
Late thoughts that you have. Here's another comedy from me.
Our next movie has a famous title. It's called Scarface, but only the title has any resemblance to the 1932 classic starring Paul Muni, the title and also the theme of self-destruction. This is a modern gangster movie about a tough young Cuban, a convict who's allowed by Castro to take one of those refugee boats to Florida, where in 1981 he begins to build a criminal drug empire by dealing in cocaine. The Cuban is played by Al Pacino. He muscles in on the established drug-dealing establishment, and in this scene he even proposes marriage to the girlfriend of one of South Florida's godfathers.
You like kids?
Kids?
Kids, you know, little kids.
Sure. Why not? As long as there's a nurse.
Good. Because I like kids. I like boys, girls. No matter me.
Look, Frank's going to be back any minute.
Come on. Sit here. I want to talk to you. Come on, sit down. I'm not going to bite you. Okay, here's the story. I come from the gutter. I know that. I have no education, but that's okay. I know the street, and I'm making all the right connections. With the right woman, there's no stopping me. I could go right to the top.
At that moment, Pacino had it all together, but later on in the movie, totally wasted by drug abuse, he's a sitting duck in a mob-controlled nightclub. That's sort of in the great tradition of the Warner Brothers gangster movies of the 30s, and Al Pacino is very good in Scarface. This performance is a return to greatness for an actor who seemed to lose his way in recent years. After his great early performances in movies like The Godfather and Dog Day Afternoon, Pacino started turning up in easy money movies like Bobby Deerfield and Author. Terrible movies, but now here he is creating an unforgettable character, Tony Montana, a tough, cruel, hateful, ambitious criminal who thinks he knows everything, but he doesn't know when to stop. Scarface has been involved in a controversy over its R rating. The ratings board originally wanted to rate this movie X for the violence in it, but they lost on appeal, and it's rated R. It is a violent movie. It's very tough and rough and not appropriate for younger audiences, but it's also a very good movie, and the violence isn't for exploitation. It's an important part of the story, and it's a good movie, I think.
You know, it's funny, I didn't like the movie at all.
At all?
Except for one aspect, and it has to do with the violence. I think that some of the shootout sequences in this film are some of the most beautifully choreographed things, showing
you know, what happens in a violent situation, including the first shootout, which I guess really got hacked a little bit up by this rating because they took out some of the most gruesome scenes, and it's still pretty gruesome. But the rest of the movie, other than the violence, I found empty. I found, at one point, he marries that woman, and I can give that away. He marries that woman, and she calls him at the end a boring guy at the end of the picture, and I thought, yes, tremendously boring from the beginning of the movie. And I just want to compare this film to the God.
No, wait a minute. Now, he's not boring at all.
Oh, yeah, fabulously boring.
He is fabulously boring. At the beginning, he's extremely interesting because he's this hustler who gets off the boat, and he's got to think faster and be tougher than anybody else to make his way in the drug trade.
Right.
By the end of the movie, he's boring for a very specific reason, which is he is totally spaced out on cocaine. He has made the key mistake of using his own stuff. Instead of dealing it, he uses it. Right. So he's boring for that reason.
No, I found him totally uninteresting. I want to compare it to an obvious comparison, The Godfather.
Sure.
In the beginning of The Godfather, when Al Pacino is in that uniform, and he says he's not part of the family, he's a different character, there's a fascinating dynamic there. And so what happens to Pacino's character in that movie, which is sort of ending up the same kind of way, that's a fall from, if not greatness, it's a fall from goodness, and it's interesting. Just let me finish. In this movie, we have a fall from louseness.
So what?
Well, it's just not interesting, Roger.
Do you think there's some rule that says the guy has to be good at the beginning so he can be bad at the end?
No,
this guy
I say it's more interesting.
He's a criminal when he gets off the boat.
That's exactly right.
Then he has,
an uninteresting criminal.
He has a criminal's version of the American dream, which is get a lot of money, build a big house, and marry this blonde,
That's right?
And then, because of the drugs and because of his own fatal flaws, it all comes crashing down. So it's the story of a guy who's bad at the beginning, bad in the middle, and worse at the end. What's wrong with that?
Who cares? I didn't care about him in the slightest. His life meant nothing to me.
There are a lot of people like this guy, I think, and their lives mean a lot in this world. That's why
all of the famous gangster films are not about louses who got lousier. Some of them are about interesting characters who got lousier.
That's a historical footnote, but it's not a criticism of this film.
It's a criticism of this movie because it doesn't compare with its obvious comparison to The Godfather. Of all the holiday movies so far, first week, I guess I'd say Yentl is my favorite.
I like Yentl a whole lot. I also like Scarface a whole lot. No matter what you say, I know I'm right.
Well, that's why you're on the show, I guess.
Number 4 on the current Billboard list of video cassette rentals, Scarface. Brian De Palma's updating of the gangster classic, this time telling the story of an immigrant played by Al Pacino who comes to the United States as a hoodlum and rises to the top of the cocaine-dealing world only to be gunned down at the end. Along the way, this Tony Montana character tries to protect his sister from imitating his lifestyle. In one of the film's few good scenes, at least as far as I'm concerned, he roughs her up when he sees her using cocaine.
This is my private room, huh? I got a beautiful nice white Blanco lounge chair for you, huh? Oh, gee, this all very bueno, more, eh?
Tony! Don't do it! What the hell, man? We must do nothing in there! We're not doing it! Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out!
What do you think, it's cute? Huh? Somebody putting his hand all over your ass? My kid sister? In the toilet?
You can't tell me what to do!
I'm telling you what to do. Listen to me. Listen to me. Come here. I got you here again. Did you hear me? I got you here again. I'm going to wipe you all over the place.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Do it now. I want to see it. I want to see it now, big shot.
Don't push me, baby.
No, I want to see it.
Get out of here. Come on.
Wait. Stop now. You got some nerve, Tony. You think you can come in here now and tell me what to do?
Get out of here.
You can't tell me what to do, Tony. No more. I am not a baby anymore. I'll do what I want to do. I'll see whoever I want to see.
Man, come on, man.
I thought Pacino's accent was too broad in the film. I thought he overacted in this movie. I thought that the film itself was pretty much worthless because it told the story not of the fall of a great man or even an average man, but the fall of a louse about whom I cared not a bit. I also think the film is phony as some kind of anti-drug statement. It's much too romantic a portrait of the drug world. I wouldn't rent this for free.
Romantic? A portrait of the drug world?
Too romantic, yeah.
That's an interesting criticism.
I think
I've never heard that before. But anyway, leaving the movie aside, as a film, despite the fact that I liked it very much, but leaving aside that point, the fact that adults are renting it is interesting because it's longer than 2 hours. This is, it's a 2 hour and what is it, about 25, 30-minute movie. It's the story of a man's life from the beginning through the middle to the end with a structure to it. And if I may say so, and I dare do say so, teenagers are more interested in films that are happening at every single instant. There has to be sound and light and motion and action and music coming at them in a Star Wars or a music video sense, instead of the old kind of old-fashioned Hollywood formula of a well-made story from beginning to end of a man's life. That's why I think it appeals more to older viewers.
I think also this is probably a weekend kind of entertainment. There's something spicy about this film, and I think it's a a weekend entertainment picture more than one that you'd watch during the week. That's about all I can come up with. I wouldn't rent it for free.
Well, I would rent it for $3. How's that? Our next movie is named Body Double, and it's the latest thriller from Brian De Palma, the man who was single-handedly trying to carry on the tradition of Alfred Hitchcock. Sometimes he does a good job, sometimes not so good. This time, I think he does a very interesting job. His movie is sort of a cross between the voyeurism of Rear Window, the phobias of Vertigo, and the shower scene in Psycho, which in this case, De Palma stages with a power drill instead of a knife. This is a violent movie. It deserves its R rating, but it's not as violent as most of the junkie slasher movies that fill the theaters during this season, and it has a lot more style. The movie begins with an unemployed actor who's being hired as a house sitter, and in this scene, he discovers that this house comes complete with a view.
To Hollywood. Yeah, to Hollywood. Man, what a view, huh? That's just part of it. There is one very special feature to this house. What you looking at? Where are you? There she is. Showtime. Dick, I'd like you to meet my favorite neighbor. Okay. Here? Whoa. Whoa. Gets better. What's she doing? Keep watching. You'll see. Want to get a little closer? Yeah. Oh, my God. She's a little out of focus. Yes. 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 Hang on. Does she do this a lot? Like clockwork, every night.
That's Craig Watson as the hero, and as he watches that woman through the telescope night after night, he begins to suspect that someone else is watching her too, that she may be in danger. And so he begins to follow her.
Excuse me. Someone's following you.
That's Deborah Shelton as the woman who fascinates him, and that's great the way that is all built up with just a little dialogue at the end. Later in the movie, without giving away too much of the story, I can say that Watson becomes convinced that a double is being used as part of a murder plot against that woman, and that leads the hero into the world of pornography in search of an actress that he believes may be working as the double. One of the interesting things about Body Double is the way that Brian De Palma uses all sorts of different film styles to tell this story. It starts out with a cheap vampire movie that Craig Watson is allegedly starring in as an actor, and then there's the Hitchcockian scenes like the one we just saw, and then at the end, the spoof on pornography. Body Double has a lot going on, and I thought most of it worked, and also, the movie is definitely scary.
It didn't really scare me, but it certainly intrigued me in the beginning scenes, the ones we just saw. I'm fascinated. It's Hitchcock's Rear Window and Vertigo, and even seeing it done not quite as well, but the stuff is so fascinating that I watched too. And then out comes
the big power drill. And that's when I thought that Brian De Palma lost control of this movie. It became almost cartoonish. It didn't gross me out. It just disappointed me, because here were characters that he had got me caught up with, and emotions, in my emotions and the character's emotions, and they just too big, too sloppy.
You know, Gene, if you think back to when Psycho came out, everybody said the same thing about the shower scene, and he's doing the same thing that Hitchcock did. In that shower scene in Psycho, you don't really see the knife entering Janet Leigh's body. You don't really see any nudity. And in this power drill scene, you don't either. It's all done with editing. And the great climactic moment when the power drill comes through the ceiling, you don't see anything except that.
I want to tell you, I've seen Psycho recently, Roger, and I liked Psycho. I liked it then. I like it now. I'm reviewing this picture. I don't like the power drill.
Okay,
I don't like
the power drill scene is obviously the great moment of truth for everybody who sees this movie. Apart from that, though, what I like, the visual imagination, all the pyrotechnics with the camera that tilts, the great lighting, the lighting from the side, the lighting from underneath, the romantic music, all of it.
The music is wonderful, and Roger...
It's much more exciting than most thrillers that you go to see today.
Well, you're saying it's better than garbage? Yes, I'll say it's better than garbage. I won't say it's a good
more than that. I didn't quite say that.
Yeah, it is a half of a movie. When it starts to go into the porno world...
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Down.
Our next movie is named Wise Guys, and this one's a real treasure. A great comedy about the mafia that stars Joe Piscopo and Danny DeVito as a couple of very low-level New Jersey foot soldiers for the mob. One day they're given $10,000 of the Godfather's money to bet on a horse, and they bet on the wrong horse because they think he doesn't know what horse is going to win, but you know what? He did know what horse was going to win, and so they owe him $250,000, and they don't have a dime. So the Don decides their punishment, which is he secretly assigns each one of them to kill the other one. Here's the scene earlier in the movie, one morning at a mob-controlled restaurant where the mafia boss is handing out the day's assignments.
Mr. Costello, you forgot about me and Mo.
I never forget about you and Mo, Harry. I always have plenty for you to do. Here.
It's your grocery list and your dry cleaning.
You don't think that I'm going to trust these other gavones with that?
Happy to do it for you, Mr. Costello.
Hey, Mo, you're about a 40 regular, right?
Yes, sir.
Try this on.
A jacket? For me, Mr. Costello?
Yeah. Go over this. Let me see how it looks in the light.
Oh, sure.
Huh?
Hey, Mr. Costello, a jacket, thanks.
Wow. The jacket actually is bulletproof.
That giant guy that you saw there with the horrible red or maroon sport coat is the enforcer for the mob, and later on the boss puts him on the case of these two guys after they've stolen his $250,000. So they are desperate. They know there's no place to turn, and so DeVito gets on the phone and pretends to be talking to his uncle in Atlantic City, an uncle who is a powerful mobster who, if he were alive, might be able to save their lives.
Ringing that. The ringing that.
Going. One more.
Hi. Aunt Sadie, it's Harry Valentini, your nephew from Newark. Guess what? We're coming to Atlantic City.
What's up? What's up?
I see something else. Aunt Sadie's Uncle Mike there. I'd like to speak with him, please. She's getting Uncle Mike. What a car! Uncle Mike! Hi! Wonderful. Listen, Uncle Mike, I'm coming down to Atlantic City. Me and Mo Dickstein. What? He said to say hello.
Let me say hello. No.
Wise Guys is a movie with one big laugh after another, and yet the thing that really holds this movie together, and you could see it there, is the genuine relationship between those two guys, between Mo and Harry, between Piscopo and DeVito. They like each other, and they stick together, and they try to fumble their way out of this mess, and they're neighbors in a probably the worst street in New Jersey, and they are surrounded. Well, I'm sure that very nice people live there, but the side that they live on looks pretty bad.
You're in trouble now,
And they are surrounded. The people across the street are great, and they are surrounded by a movie full of some of the best character actors in the business. The big surprise for me in Wise Guys, incidentally, was Danny DeVito. I've liked him before, but he has never been better than this time, and this shows what he can do in a way that I think will be used in other movies now. Wise Guys was directed by Brian De Palma, who specializes in thrillers and crime movies, and he made Scarface and Dressed to Kill among his serious films. This is his first comedy in a long time, and it is a good, laugh-out-loud comedy.
I don't even think that's strong enough. It's a great laugh-out-loud comedy, and I'm going to have a tough time at the end of the year deciding which film I laughed out loud the longest, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, this one, or Hannah and Her Sisters. I mean, this is really a riotous film, fabulous. DeVito, in his starring role, he's not supporting people now like in Romancing the Stone. He's absolutely terrific. There's a performance that you referred to, but I want to give credit to. The guy in the big red coat, I think he makes this movie work just as much as the two stars. That's played by a wrestler, a former wrestler, Captain Lou Albano. He plays the fix. He plays this movie at a volume pitch that if I actually started to use it, I'd blow out every TV set that's watching us. I mean, it's a screaming performance that is hilarious. This movie, I don't know how this director, Brian De Palma, did it. He starts out at this level and keeps it funny and intense. It's just spectacular.
Well, one of the things he did, just to repeat myself, is he fills the movie with great performances. We could go down the list and start. And the thing is, each actor is able to make his little character or his corner of the movie into a three-dimensional person, a presence here, so that these are people who are interacting with each other instead of, as is so often the case in crime movies, simply stereotypes or simply one-dimensional.
Or vehicles for setting up a physical stunt. There aren't physical stunts here. They're people running into each other, not cars.
That's right. There are a couple of lines in this movie. Now, one that I don't want to give it. I will. They talk about. You mentioned that the guy's name is the Fixer. He's known as the Fixer. At one point, they say, "What will Mrs. Fixer think?" And I laughed for about 4 minutes at that point.
The Untouchable was inspired, of course, by the old TV show, but a real effort has been made to turn this material into an ambitious gangster film. There's a big budget, a lot of impressive locations, an authentic look of the 1930s, and a script by the distinguished playwright David Mamet. So it's too bad that the result is a disappointment, a respectable film that lacks the fire, the passion, and even the humor we might expect from this material. The movie stars Robert De Niro as Al Capone in a performance that does not have the usual De Niro energy. This is a very routine Capone.
Somebody messes with me, I'm going to mess with him. Somebody steals from me, I'm going to say you stole, not talk to him for spitting on a sidewalk.
Kevin Costner is Elliot Ness, the man who vows to bust up Capone's mob, and Sean Connery is the honest Chicago cop who can help him do it. Together they form a strike force known as the Untouchables, federal agents at war with Capone. But first, Connery has to make sure that Ness is tough enough.
If you open the ball on these people, Mr. Ness, you must be prepared to go all the way. Because they won't give up the fight until one of you is dead.
I want to get Capone. I don't know how to get him.
You want to get Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. And that's how you get Capone.
That's a good scene, but most of the movie never really gives us a sense of the human qualities of these characters, and it ends up with the usual gangland movie gunfight. You can see in all of those scenes that this is a great-looking movie, and a lot of effort went into it, but it has nothing new or especially interesting to say about Capone, Elliot Ness, or the whole Prohibition period. It's a curiously lifeless film. It's almost as if it were framed and put on the wall, a film in which everything looks okay, but we don't really feel very much, and that's strange because the director, Brian De Palma, usually does a much better job of shaking me up. The Untouchables, for me, was a disappointment.
And not for me at all, and I'm surprised because you say it has nothing new to say about Ness. Well, first of all, it's completely different from the Ness that we know from Robert Stack, who was a stern, tough guy. This is a young, innocent Ness who has to go through these rites of passage with his tutor, basically Sean Connery, in a sensational role. And I'm so glad to see him get that kind of a part to prove that he's such a good actor. in teaching this kid the ropes of how you have to sometimes break the law to get a bad guy. And that's the real moral dilemma of the film, which I find exciting, which gets into issues of capital punishment and what you have to do to get bad guys, which is a subject that's even current today.
Well, I agree with you about Sean Connery, and I liked his performance a whole lot. I thought the Elliot Ness character was extremely pale.
He's supposed to be in the beginning.
Well, but also in addition to that, it seemed to me that he was very passive. It seemed to me that he didn't really engage, that the lines were written in such a way as to make him seem so lifeless that we didn't really care as he sat there as this prim, straight arrow coming up with those kind of self-justifying lines.
I thought he's intentionally sweet at the beginning, and then he gets tougher and tougher and starts to hate himself. And as a routine shootout at the end, I thought the shootout at the end of this film, even though it is derivative from some classic movies, is fabulous.
It ripped off Battleship Potemkin, which I thought was hardly necessary. But what did you think about Robert De Niro? Weren't you disappointed? His role seemed to be just in a different unit than the rest of the movie. It was like they cleared the screen, De Niro came on, and then he did his thing, and then he's gone again. He didn't interact, really, with the rest of the film.
This movie isn't about Capone, and I'm glad it isn't about Capone. It's about Ness and this new cop, Jimmy Malone, and I thought that was exciting.
So you agree with me about De Niro? You were disappointed, too?
No, I just didn't think it was important. I think he did a little. It was a small role, and he did it. Nothing special.
Yeah, well, that doesn't sound like what we expect from De Niro.
Yeah, but I think the movie is sensational.
Our first movie is Casualties of War, and it's based on a true story of a tragedy that took place during the Vietnam War when a 5-man unit of American soldiers kidnapped a young Vietnamese woman from her village, took her along on a patrol with them, raped her, and then murdered her. 4 of the men took part in the crime. The 5th one refused to join them, and although he was powerless to stop them from doing what they did, it was his testimony that eventually sent the other 4 to military prison. The movie stars Michael J. Fox as a soldier who doesn't want to go along with the crime, and Sean Penn as the sergeant brutalized by combat, who was the ringleader for the whole episode.
This is nuts. We ain't supposed to be doing this. Everybody else is up for this. This is kidnapping, ain't it, Sergeant?
Michael Fox knows that what they're doing is wrong, and he says that it's wrong, but Penn makes it clear that in the jungle there's only one standard, the standard of power.
Clark got a weapon, Clark got a knife. We all got weapons. Anybody can blow anybody away. Any second. Which is the way it ought to be. Always.
Penn is so good there. I mean, throughout this entire movie, he is really so tough and so angry that it helps to convince you as to why he could force these other guys to do basically what was his idea to begin with. The bitter lesson of Casualties of War is that it's not always enough to have morality on your side. You also have to have the power to back up your beliefs. The movie's about the group dynamic in that small military unit where the veterans of combat have become so hardened that they no longer consider the Vietnamese to even be human beings. Fox is the newcomer. He's only been in combat a few weeks. He knows what they're doing is wrong, but he's outvoted, intimidated, and powerless. That process makes Casualties of War a strong and perceptive movie, although I could have done without the scenes at the beginning and the end of the film, which make the whole movie into a flashback, providing a conclusion that is so uplifting and gentle and unconvincing that it feels tacked on. I like the movie apart from the beginning and end.
I liked it too. I didn't like the setup where you see that Michael J. Fox is alive and telling the story in reflection, because that takes away obviously some of the tension.
Right.
During the piece. You know he's going to survive, and of course that's not what you know in any Vietnam situation. I think one of the problems people may have with this picture is that it is not a big-scale Vietnam epic, and with people like De Palma, Penn, and Michael Fox in it, you think big kind of picture. And it's a small, singular story, one person, one crime, which is obviously emblematic of a lot of what went on in the war. I liked it too. I thought Michael Fox did a good job in getting rid of his TV personality, his light comic personality, and as the picture progressed, his character was not...
Both of them did a good job, because Sean Penn, who, as we've said before, is one of the best actors around right now, he is so filled with venom and so filled with this coiled up tension that he's gotten from all of these months in the jungle, all of these months of living under the constant threat of death, that he is able to absolutely impose his will on the others, and he convinces us that he could do that. There's a scene where he's shaving before he's about to go out for his last night, and the way he shaved had me on the edge of my seat, as if he were going to take that razor and do something else with it, or even cut himself.
Yeah, I figured he was going to cut himself. Let's talk about the a moral point of the film, which is said very directly into the camera, basically, by Michael Fox, where he says, that because a soldier can die any moment, that is not a reason for him to be less human, but rather to be more human, more moral.
Yes.
I don't know that that applies in the battlefield conditions, but I know it applies in life.
Well, the amazing thing about this movie is how it really asks each one of us to ask the question, how would you behave in a situation like that? Would I have been any braver than the Fox character? No.
No, I wouldn't.
I think I would have been totally intimidated by Penn and these other three people.
I did testify at a court-martial, though. I will tell you this. I did testify. I must give myself a little credit. I actually, at jeopardy of being sent into...
Well, the one thing I would have preferred about this movie, to just tell the story and leave off the prologue and the epilogue.
I want to repeat, it is a small-scale, narrow story, one person, not a big extravaganza like Apocalypse Now. Our next film is, so we both like The Abyss and
Casualties of War, except what I can understand is why you keep emphasizing that it's a small movie or it's a small-scale movie. I mean, it's as big as it needs to be in order to tell this very, very important story about this dynamic involving these people. It's not a small movie in that sense at all. And it probably was a pretty expensive movie, too.
I don't care about money. I'm simply talking about the scope of the picture, because I think when people see, hear Vietnam, I think they automatically, and hear these big names, they automatically think it's going to be a big-scale picture, and they may be disappointed if they don't find it that way.
I think they'd be more disappointed if it were a bad picture, actually, and that's not
who's going to argue with that?
Not you, apparently.
I'm going to jail, aren't I? Well, let me get out first. Now, listen to me. You don't say anything. Don't cover your face. Don't hide your head. You don't even know they're there, okay?
That's a scene from the eagerly awaited new film, The Bonfire of the Vanities, based on Tom Wolfe's fabulous book about New York City in the 80s, with its stock exchange wheeler-dealers, their high-life society, and the fear and loathing with which they regard the black and Hispanic underclass. The book is full of wit and bile. The movie is full of something else. Director Brian De Palma soft pedals the whole story and has made a very bad film here. I'm very disappointed. In the story, Tom Hanks plays a super Wall Street bond salesman named Sherman McCoy, who considers himself a master of the universe, not bound by any rules, as he prepares to sneak out of his fabulous apartment away from his razor-thin wife and toward his mistress.
What on earth are you doing?
Well, I'm taking the dog for a walk.
That's Kim Cattrall as his wife. Later, Sherman picks up his married girlfriend, Maria, played by Melanie Griffith, at the airport. They take a wrong turn coming home and wind up in the Bronx, where they're going to be confronted by a couple of young black men. Trying to escape, they back into one of the young men, injuring him. And back home, Sherman and his mistress debate whether to report what they believe was an attempted robbery. Melanie Griffith looks kind of blousy here, not as sharp as the book's character.
But if we call the police now, then we're not...
Let's call them. Let's call them and invite them over here to our little love nest. They would love to get their hands on us. The police, the press, and all the rest of the media rats.
The other key player in the story is Peter Fallow, played by Bruce Willis, a drunken tabloid journalist who sees the juiciness of this racially inflammatory story.
Everyone is calling me by my first name, like they know me, like they own me. The lawyers and the police and the newspapers. Now, how did I get to be so important?
You're not important. Just dinner. Don't you get it? A week from now, a month from now, these people aren't even going to remember what they ate.
Willis seems to be much more of a drunk than a journalist in this film, in an inappropriately laconic performance. The criminal justice system also comes in under attack as we meet a grasping district attorney and his staff looking for a popular case to prosecute that will win the DA the black vote in an upcoming election.
So your boss, the district attorney, Mr. Weiss, who every night dreams of one day becoming mayor of New York, what he needs is a white man. He needs to find him, he needs to book him, and he needs to throw him in jail.
Well, all the subject material is intact from the book, but the attitude of contempt is missing. This is more of a lighthearted romp, and I wasn't laughing, not at all. A namby-pamby ending with the judge there, Morgan Freeman, sermonizing, is one of the worst of many bad scenes. I didn't even want to see this. I love this book so much, I didn't want to see the film made, and boy, I sure didn't want to see it made this way.
Well, you know, one of the problems we both have is that we've read the book. I can only imagine what this movie would seem like to somebody who hadn't read the book. Maybe they'd like it more. The problem is that time after time, the book made such an impression on me that I was sitting there saying to the screen, you know, that's not who that person is. That's not why they're doing that. That's not really what happened. That's not what it was like. Until what you get is sort of like kind of cartoony highlights of events in the movie, with the movie giving you no idea at all as to why these things are happening or the motivations of the people involved.
Or why it's so important to document what was going on in New York at this time with these people.
Yeah.
There's no urgency here.
You know, in a movie that is filled with disappointments, the biggest disappointment for me was the Bruce Willis character.
Absolutely.
They really missed a chance here. I mean, why do they get so tied up with the notion that they have to fill up a movie with stars that they don't look at the book and see who this drunken, British, freeloading little guy was, and why not get somebody who can play that fascinating character instead of having a big lump of dead space there taking up so much screen time?
The question I have is for Brian De Palma. If you want to make this film, why make it this way?
If you wanted to make it at all, try to make it...
There are a dozen directors that could have done a much better job.
Okay. The first movie is Carlito's Way, and this is another hard-boiled, colorful look at the criminal way of life by director Brian De Palma and actor Al Pacino, who collaborated on the unforgettable Scarface 10 years ago. This time, Pacino plays Carlito Briganti, a big man in New York drug circles, until he goes to prison and loses touch with the street. Freed after 5 years of a 30-year term, Carlito plays his hearing like an acceptance speech at an award ceremony.
Completely rehabilitated, reinvigorated, reassimilated, and finally going to be relocated. And I want to thank a lot of people for that.
When he comes out again, he wants to go straight. He keeps his nose clean while becoming a partner in a nightclub, hoping to make enough money to move to the Bahamas and open a legitimate business.
Charlie, please, you can't do this. Benny Blanco spends a lot of money here. He's a nickel bagger. Come on. What happened to you? What are you acting like this for? It doesn't make sense you should hate this guy, because this guy is you 20 years ago. Never me. Never me.
Carlito's lawyer in the film is played in a brilliant performance by Sean Penn, who is almost unrecognizable here as a man who has crossed over the line from the law into crime.
I'm in an impossible situation here. Once I get Tony on the shore, there's a distinct possibility that he and his Goomba son have got some plans for me.
This is Sean Penn's first movie role in 3 years, and another reminder of how good an actor he really is. The movie also co-stars Penelope Ann Miller as Carlito's girlfriend, who never quite understands all of the trouble he's in.
We can, bust the chain. Chase me around the apartment.
In his movie The Untouchables, De Palma staged a shootout in Chicago's Union Station. This time, it's the turn of New York's Grand Central Station as mobsters chase Carlito looking for revenge. Carlito's Way is a big, smart, energetic film that seems to know a lot about the world of New York's professional criminals. The film is narrated by Pacino as Carlito, and he tells us what he's thinking as he negotiates his way through the minefields of enemies and former friends. His attempt to go straight has a counterpoint in Sean Penn's lawyer, who gets mired in cocaine and double-crosses himself into a lot of trouble. Pacino gives an interesting performance, aggressive but also thoughtful and a little sad. Now, there are times when his accent owes more to his character in Sin of a Woman than to a Puerto Rican gangster, but, you know, that didn't bother me, and I really got absorbed in this movie.
I only got absorbed at the end in the chase in Grand Central Station, which is very well done, and it's something that Brian De Palma knows how to do very, very well. But before that, I must say, I had the same kind of objections I had to Scarface, which was that it was about a character that I really wasn't interested in, because of the movie makes his behavior heroic in a way that I didn't think it deserved.
It wasn't heroic, Gene. He's just a guy who used to be a criminal, and now he doesn't want to be a criminal anymore, and it shows how difficult that is for him, because all of his connections are with the wrong people.
I'm talking about the look and style of the film.
Terrific look, great style.
I'm talking about the way that it tends to romance the scuzzy behavior in the beginning, in the courtroom scene at the beginning, in early violent action in the bar. I have another problem, that the relationship with the girlfriend, a real hackneyed character of the woman who wants to be a dancer on Broadway but has to work in a strip club.
Now, what about Sean Penn?
Well, I will tell you this.
What?
His performance is good because
Yes.
I did not recognize him.
No.
I didn't recognize him at all.
And he's very convincing.
But the character, again, I thought was way
The
over the
character
top.
was right on the mark.
Way over the top.
Right on the mark.
Way over the top. I didn't believe it for a second that the lawyer would be that ridiculous.
I don't know what it is
laughable.
about. There's something combination of De Palma and Pacino that just turns you off. I don't know what it is.
Actually, it's more De Palma than it is Pacino when they're working in these two films. I've liked other work by both of them a lot of the times.
My video pick this week is Brian De Palma's crime thriller Carlito's Way, which got some negative reviews, including one from Gene when it was released last year, but now it's out on video, and I think it deserves a second look. The movie stars Al Pacino as a street-smart criminal who comes out of prison and dreams of getting enough money so he can go straight, marry his girlfriend, and escape to the Caribbean.
I know how this dream ends, Charlie. It isn't in paradise. It ends with me carrying you into an emergency room.
The movie contains an amazingly good performance, a supporting role by Sean Penn as Carlito's sleazy lawyer. Brian De Palma is one of the best directors alive when it comes to choreographing long action scenes without any dialogue. And in this movie, there is a deadly cat-and-mouse game in a train station that's virtuoso filmmaking. Carlito's Way, out on video, my pick of the week.
Good morning, Mr. Phelps. This is your mission should you choose to accept it. Should you or any member of your IM force be caught or killed, the Secretary will disavow all knowledge of your actions. Ethan Hunt will be your point man, as usual.
Tom Cruise leads a team of spies in Mission Impossible, a solid adaptation of the 60s TV show thanks to Brian De Palma's creepy and exciting direction and the absolute conviction of Tom Cruise himself in the lead role. And it is the standard Tom Cruise role. Just like in Top Gun, Cocktail, and Days of Thunder, Cruise plays a gutsy guy with a stubborn streak that more than matches his technical expertise.
We're being ambushed, Ethan. Abort, that's an order.
Negative. Galitzin is on the move.
No, damn it, no! I said abort!
Cruise's assignment is to recover government files listing all of its secret agents worldwide. But in tracking this information, Cruise stumbles into a nest of double dealers, and his integrity is questioned too by his own boss, played by Henry Czerny.
Let's see if you can follow me around the room. The drunk Russian's on the embankment at 7, 8 o'clock. A couple waltzing around me at the embassy at 9 and 11. The waiter standing behind Hannah at the top of the stairs. Bow tie, 12 o'clock. The other IMF team. You're worried about me. Why?
Suddenly, Cruise is on the run from his own colleagues, and that leads him to form a new team of operatives that has a most unusual target.
IMF mainframe.
Where exactly is it?
In Langley.
In Langley? The one in Virginia, Langley.
Inside CIA headquarters at Langley.
Yes, there's action in Mission Impossible, a rousing train trip through the channel that links England and France. Now, as exciting as that is, I actually preferred the invasion of CIA headquarters by Cruise to that train ride. The breaking in, inspired by the jewel heist picture Rafifi, and later repeated by Jules Dassin in Top Cappy, is a superb, nearly silent action sequence that pulls this whole movie together. But my biggest compliments go to Cruise himself. He believes in his stories to such a degree that his conviction in the material bounces off the screen and carries us along too. Ultimately, he's the reason we care about the very convoluted goings-on in Mission Impossible. I had people, Roger, tell me, I don't know what this movie was about.
Well,
couldn't figure it out.
You know, I don't think you and I know what it was about, because earlier today we had a long discussion trying to figure out exactly what Cruise is doing and why, and it really doesn't matter because it's all surface. This movie is, in a way, the opposite of The Arrival, which was about ideas. In this movie, you'd be very hard-pressed to extract an idea from it. It's all visuals, it's all situations, it's all adventure and spectacle and special effects and suspense.
But this
and very done and very well done.
I'm just impressed. And this is why these actors, and Harrison Ford is another one, the acting of action heroes is so undervalued by critics and by the Motion Picture Academy, but it pays off.
Oh, it's hard to do. It's hard to do. The only thing that I question about this movie is, seeing as I did enjoy it,
I did too,
and I'm giving it a thumbs up, I wonder if it might have been better if they had a plot that anyone could understand. Because I defy anyone to come out of this movie and explain to me or to you or to anybody else exactly what everybody was doing and why.
There's a lot of double dealing. I think I could take a stab at it.
There's a lot of double dealing, but there's also a lot of fudging.
Okay.
There were 2 hits. The girl next to me, she threatened him, took something, got shot, and ran away.
Nicolas Cage plays an Atlantic City detective investigating the murder of a cabinet member during a boxing match in Snake Eyes. And this is a film that succeeds, I think, primarily on the strength and charisma of its actors. A point worth noting because the movie was directed by the very talented and stylish Brian De Palma, who is rarely upstaged by his actors. At the fight, before shots had been fired, Detective Cage gets some straight talk from his very best friend, a Navy commander played by another first-rate actor, Gary Sinise.
You got to get out of this town. You know that, don't you?
Would you stop going all Jiminy Cricket on me? You can't help yourself, can you?
Really, I mean, get your butt down to D.C. I call a few guys I know from Annapolis, arrange some interviews, get your GS rating, you're in our program. Bureau of Diplomatic Security pays about double what your salary is here, and the money's clean. Rick.
All right. You got to fix my life later. I got money on this. I want to stay in a good mood, you know. Keep positive, because this is fight night.
After an assassin's bullet mortally wounds the United States Secretary of Defense, whom Sinise was assigned to protect, both he and Cage try to chase the killer, as well as a mysterious woman who was talking to the Defense Secretary just before he was shot. She is played by Carla Gugino.
Change your plans. They're at the elevators. Hang a right.
Wait a minute.
Gary Sinise looks as though he bulked up for this role, or maybe it's just the uniform, but it gives him a commanding presence on film, a leading man quality I haven't seen before from him, and allows him to match up well with the high-energy Nicolas Cage.
Sam, now I'm betting that the redhead you follow is the same person who told Tyler to throw the fight. She's 1, Shooter's 2, Tyler's 3. The drunk who shouted the signal is 4, and whoever was on the other end of that radio is 5. 5 people make a conspiracy, right?
Snake Eyes doesn't add up to much. Most of the time, the story is forgettable, even when the honesty of the main characters is questioned. No, when I think of Snake Eyes, I don't think of a story. I think of 2 very fine actors working hard, very hard, without a net to entertain us.
Well, I'm afraid I can't give this movie thumbs up, and I'll tell you why. I think about 45 minutes into it, it just loses the thread. The opening of this film is terrific.
Sure.
There is a shot at the beginning of this film that I'm not even going to go into detail about, that I could just look at 3 or 4 times in a row just with sheer voluptuous pleasure. And the entire setup is terrific, and then the ending of the film, frankly, is ludicrous. When they have one of these totally absurd manufactured confrontations out in the middle of a hurricane, where the police and the suspects and the good guys and the bad guys and the victims all turn up at the same time and say exactly what they have to say, and you say, come on, this is the kind of action climax I was talking about that the previous film didn't have.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really cares about the climax of this story.
Except that it's absurd, it's laughable.
Yeah.
It's so bad that it just undermines, it pulls the rug out from the rest of the film.
But, Roger, what about these 2 performances?
Oh, Nicolas Cage, very good until the end when it's all overwrought because the writing just sabotages the acting.
And did you experience the same thing about Sinise that I did, that he was stronger than I've seen him before?
He was very good in this film, yes. But
I mean,
once
he's been
again,
good
by
before.
the end of the film, it just all goes to pieces.
All right, split vote, I guess.
Our first movie is The Black Dahlia, and it really kind of seems like my kind of movie. You've got Scarlett Johansson in a love triangle with Josh Hartnett and Aaron Eckhart. Hilary Swank plays a bisexual look-alike for a famous corpse. Brian De Palma of Scarface fame is directing from a book by the great James Ellroy. Too bad, though, that De Palma's gruesomely entertaining pulp story collapses into a pile of steaming camp in the last act. I loved much of this movie and then hated the last 20 minutes or so. We start off, it's 1947, and Los Angeles is in the middle of a post-war boom.
Like you to meet Kay Lake.
Hello.
Hello.
You beefing up?
You know.
I was just telling Kay here about our new hobby.
Are you a fight fan, Miss Lake?
No, Lee used to drag me. I was taking art classes so I'd sketch.
She made me quit fighting the smokers. Didn't want me doing the vegetable shuffle.
Well, I promise not to hurt you.
That's Hartnett in probably his best performance to date as the earnest Bucky. Your name is Bucky, you gotta be earnest. And Eckhart plays Lee. He's an ambitious, rule-bending, no-nonsense type who could be the cousin of the Russell Crowe character in L.A. Confidential. Johansson plays the center of their kind of weird love triangle. When a wannabe starlet turned bad girl is murdered in gruesome fashion, Bucky and Lee are on the case.
What do I have to do to keep my name out of the papers?
What do you mean?
That's not very convincing.
I don't need your daddy's money, if that's what you're saying.
You know it's not what I'm saying.
Hilary Swank exudes sexiness in a trashy role as a bisexual praying mantis from a wealthy family populated entirely by insane people. Mia Kirshner from The L Word plays the victim, Betty Short. She's seen only in an audition reel.
Miss Short, you know, this is a very sad scene. Do you think you're capable of playing sadness?
Sure. I can do that.
Okay, we get it. Hollywood killed Betty Short's spirit long before she was actually murdered. De Palma's penchant for overwrought set pieces, flashy camera moves, and interlocking sex and violence seems perfectly suited for this salacious material, and for about 2/3 of the journey, The Black Dahlia is kind of a glorious B-movie. But then it all goes ugly and really stupid. The last act revelations aren't just implausible, they're ridiculous and they come out of left field. We have all these murders and twists and turns, and now a bunch of people we don't really know that well are going to stand around explaining it all. That drove me crazy, so I have to give it thumbs down.
Yeah, you know, it's hard for me because this is such a great collection of actors, and De Palma's, you know, I mean, he's a legendary director.
Yeah.
I have to give it thumbs down as well. I found it confusing from the very beginning. I enjoyed looking at the movie, but it was just, I came out and I just thought it was just long and dark and totally inscrutable, and then it really did take this kind of crazy turn at the end.
Yeah.
And it was too bad because it had a lot of interesting themes in it. There was a lot of stuff about American culture at the time, about the way these characters were interacting that were separate from the actual Black Dahlia murder case. People should know, if we didn't mention it, that this is a completely fictionalized account of what happened.
Oh my goodness! Other than about, you know, the name of the character, the Betty Short character,
where she's found, everything else is completely made up. It's from a James Ellroy novel, and you know, it's beautiful to look at, it's interesting, but it just never really gripped you in a way that I think with these actors and this material and this director, it
There's
could
too
have.
much is really what it comes down to, because you have a notorious murder, you have some terrific actors, and then he tacks on all this other stuff and these side characters, and you're right, we're flip-flopping and going back and forth. I don't want to really be giving away too much here, but you get to a certain point where they're saying that certain people did certain things, and I'm like, who is that?
Who's that guy?
I don't know who that guy is that did that. Because I just spent 2/3 of a movie getting to know a bunch of other people, so don't, you know, that to me is like one of the biggest cheats you can do in film, is to bring in a bunch of people toward the end and say, well, they're really the people that did this, or you thought somebody else did
and
that.
And they step away from the Black Dahlia murder so much in this film that you kind of forget why you're there. Yeah, I mean, Hilary Swank is fantastic. It's the sexiest, she's the most sexualized role she's ever played, and she really kind of gives it her all, and she's very sexy.
And she kind of does this accent.
It is a little kind of periody. It gets a little campy, but she's great to look at. I actually thought that Mia Kirshner was fantastic as the Black Dahlia. I really liked the work she did. I mean, there was a lot of it, but I don't blame her. I think she did really great work with interesting and difficult material, but in the end, it just, none of it worked.
I think some of it worked, but not enough to recommend it.
Yeah, okay.
Brian De Palma's Redacted is the latest movie to try to make some sense out of the situation in Iraq, and it uses documentary techniques to tell a story based on an actual incident. The story is ugly. A group of American soldiers rape a teenage Iraqi girl and kill her family. And while parts of this film are certainly raw and upsetting, it's mainly an angry, uneven mess.
What do y'all think's going to be the first casualty of this entire conflict, huh?
You.
Next slide. It's not going to be Rush or Flake or Don't Ask, Don't Tell over here. You know what it's going to be? Do you know what it's going to be? You know what it's going to be?
What's it going to be?
It's going to be the truth.
A lot of the cast are making their film debuts in Redacted, and while they give it their best, neither De Palma's script nor his direction serve them very well. I give him credit for trying something very serious here, and for risking attacks from the usual ideological blowhards. But this movie ultimately tells us more about one filmmaker's indignation at the war in Iraq than it does give us any insight about the war itself.
You're so right, Tony. I didn't have much use for this film film at all, noble intentions notwithstanding. Yeah, sure. I mean, the gimmick, you know, you give them points for that. We've seen that a million times before. Here's a guy shooting a video, and here's a documentary, and here's the cell phone stuff. The acting's horrible, and at one point, they all have to, like, stay in front of the security camera for this extended
and have
sequence,
a big argument.
And have this horrible argument, which you know, all this overacting. And, you know, these guys are all such monsters and creeps right off the bat. You know, it's based on a horrible incident, but it serves no purpose to show us this version of what may have happened.
Well, because it doesn't give us any insight. It doesn't really let us, you know, who are these guys, what's going on there. It seems to me
very condescending to the audience,
and it's glib.
we're getting hit over the head with this so much.